Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Edwards versus Yafai fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Edwards is 21-1 with 4 KOs, and Yafai is 8-0 with 6 KOs. This fight is for the vacant WBC Interim World Flyweight title. Edwards' last fight was a win via technical unanimous decision versus Coryell, and Yafai's last fight was a win via TKO in round 3 versus Oliva. Yafai is a southpaw. Edwards switches stances quite often, but traditionally is an orthodox fighter. Edwards is 28 and Yafai is 31. Edwards has a 60-inch reach to compare that to Yafai's 68-inch reach. Edwards' loss came via stoppage in round 9 versus Rodriguez in 2023. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, this WBC interim title is on the line. It's a good belt, I think, to have on the line. I don't think this fight is quite warranted a world title fight, but the flyweight division is looking a bit more interesting as of recent. And when you look at some of the names, of course, when you look at the WBC champion, it's now Kenshiro Chiraji. That's a great name to have as a champion. That could set up a great fight after this for the winner. And Edwards, I'm sure, would be eager to go to Japan. Yafai, I'm sure, would be the same as well. Possibly, maybe, one or two more fights. But, at the same time, if Yafai beats Edwards, then it's a huge win for his career. So, in general, this fight is it's a good fight to be made. It's sure going to be an entertaining contest. It's interesting to see, both fighters at very different parts in their careers. I mean, Edwards was climbing the ladder for a long time, had to take a lot more fights than realistically he wanted to get to the level in which he wanted to compete at, because certain champions just weren't too keen to fight him, in a rush, and weren't really kind of queuing up to fight him. And then eventually he had that Rodriguez fight, and that Rodriguez fight, you know, obviously that he did lose it. That was the fight that he was calling for a long time. That was the fight he wanted for a long time, and it was a very entertaining contest. I don't think it knocked his stock due to, even though he lost, I don't think it knocked his stock, because it was still, like I say, a very good performance, and it's aged well, the loss realistically for Edwards since then, because of what Rodriguez has been able to do as of recent, becoming that pound for pound star in which he is. And Edwards, I don't necessarily know if he wanted to take this fight versus Yafai. I think he was, experiencing this American boxing life where he was boxing on some big stages. Yafai's boxed on some big stages in America as well, but as of his last fight as well, he kind of came back down to, the English reality of boxing. But Edwards has been kind of riding this high of these big American events. He obviously fought Rodriguez, and that was a huge event, and the eyes were all on him. But then he then went on to fight Coryell, which was a performance in which, was a very good performance. The eyes were perhaps not focused upon him, as I believe he was co-main event, but still it was a excellent performance from himself. And you perhaps for him would see this as maybe a little bit of a downgrade. I mean, Coryell was somebody who had just knocked out the lightweight champion in Nonchinga. Obviously, he then went on to lose, but he was still a guy who'd recently fought for a world title. He was a guy who was on top of the world realistically, even though coming off the loss, it wasn't a bad loss, and he was like somebody who was a world kind of level contender. Yafai hasn't really shown that he can be there yet. He hasn't fought a level of opponent that shows he's there yet, and his last performance was just a kind of takeover contest against Oliva, where he wanted to be active before this big fight, and I respect him for taking a fight like that. But in general, I'm not sure if Edwards really wanted to take this contest, because obviously it's putting him back on a main event slot, but it's in Yafai's hometown. It's things are perhaps more in his favour, and like I say, it's giving Yafai that opportunity which Edwards didn't have to do. But nonetheless, it's a fight that's happening, and for the fans, I think it is a great fight to see. For Yafai, he's been moving quickly, but he has the Olympic pedigree, and in general, everybody knows Olympians move fast. They get fast tracked, and they get pushed to world titles quicker because they get the promoters pick them up from the early points in their careers. And like I say, if they pass tests leading up to it, they will progress very quickly, and that's what Eddie Hearn's done with Yafai. And it's expected from an Olympian, and he's still a big name in his own right. I mean, they're both from fighting families. They both had this fight branded as Bloodline, and Edwards, of course, having Charlie Edwards as well, his brother, fighting, even though they perhaps haven't always seen eye to eye. That's a fighting family there. But then also Yafai having his brothers fighting in Gamal and Cal Yafai. They've both got them fighting families. They've got that bit of history there. I don't necessarily think Edwards has gotten on with all the Yafais. I think there has been a bit of a back and forth. Edwards has had a bit of a back and forth with a lot of guys, but like I say, it's a bit of a back and forth. There is a bit of a storyline there between the two of them, and Yafai, this is his first time being an underdog for a fight, and that's definitely going to, in my opinion, play a factor. But like I said, it's a return to his hometown boxing, and the last time he boxed here, from what I believe, was against Tommy Frank, and that's when he won, first round stoppage. It was a great win for himself. It was a great stoppage in a brutal win realistically, and he seems perhaps a bit more fueled up when he's at home. I don't think he's a massive ticket seller outside of his hometown, and I don't think Edwards is a massive ticket seller in general. But I think when he had the fans behind him in his hometown of Birmingham, I think he was very fueled up. He seemed like, he was shouting at Tommy Frank when he knocked him down. He seemed very hyped, very kind of ready to keep him going, and just really hyped by the fact that he got him down in the first round. And, it was surprising, but in general, like I say, it was something that created that hype. It was something that, in general, like I say, fueled him up, and it also fueled up all the fans as well. And so, like I say, it was a good performance from himself, that fight was, and so perhaps we're going to see that as well coming in to another at home fight for himself. Obviously, like I say, Edwards, I'm not too sure how much he wanted this fight, but he's also coming into this fight with a changed in gym. It's interesting to see. He was very much supportive of the Smith Gym, the Steel City Gym. He was very much supportive of that, and was, representing coming out of there. And that Steel City Gym has some great fighters at the moment and is doing excellently. And so it's interesting to see how he has switched gyms. I believe he's moved up to Liverpool to train. Not too sure as to why, but like I said, I think that might change some things a little bit. I'm not too sure, like I say, why has it happened and everything like that. But like I say, that could play a factor. He's obviously coming off that last fight where he got a really bad cut versus Carrillo. That's why the fight was taken to a technical unanimous decision. He got that really bad cut, and it was a very bad cut. I mean, you can still see the scar on his face as to now. So that's something else which is going to probably play a factor as well. If that opens up again, then it's a very bad cut the first time. If it opens up again, it could get even worse. So that's another thing that we got to kind of watch out for. There's the talks of him smoking before the fight and everything like that. I don't necessarily know how much he's really kind of treating his body like a temple and everything like that. And you don't have to. I've heard of other fighters smoking in the past. I mean, you see in the UFC, Carlos Prates is a name in which he's doing very well and progressing very well in the UFC, and he's been someone who's outwardly smoked, and you can see you've seen him doing it in press conferences and stuff. Edwards isn't doing that, but it's just an added thing, which, like I say, is that gonna benefit him in the long term as he is, getting a bit older with each fight. Like I say, your fight is older. That's surprising. You kind of expect your fighter to be this younger, up and coming fighter, but Edwards is a lot younger than I think a lot of people think. Yafai is that bit older, having that amateur experience. Sometimes when you're waiting around for the Olympics, you have to wait around a bit longer, and it does kind of stop your progression in the pros a little bit. And like I say, maybe that's another reason as to why he's been wanting to progress quicker, because of, he's not old, but his age is getting on slowly and gradually, like everybody's is. But I'm sure, like I say, he's wanted to progress fast. Another reason why, because of that. In general, I think Edwards, your fight, it's a good fight. There's limited fights in the division that are big fights. So, as a whole, for British fans, I'm a fan of this fight. I'm sure a lot of British fans are. It's brought some relatively big-ish names onto the card. I mean, Callum Smith is a big name to have on the undercard. It was quite surprising to see that he was even on it in general and featured on it. He's not got an opponent or anything like that, so it's not going to be a big contest for himself. But it's a big name to have. The likes of Cameron Vuong versus Gwyn is a very good fight in my opinion. Kieran Conway versus Kelly is an all right fight. It's sad to see that Conway isn't fighting on that Japanese card anymore, or that Japanese tournament anymore. But like I said, there are some relatively big names, and in general, the UK is always calling out for more bigger boxing events, especially as Riyadh season is taking a lot of them to Saudi at the moment. So this is nice to see that this is happening. And I suppose to speak about them both individually as fighters, Edwards as a fighter, he moves with his punches excellently. That was shown versus Curiel. Curiel was that kind of aggressive come forwards fighter who I think was still believing in his power a lot from that knockout win versus Nonchinga. Obviously, like I say, he lost after that, but I think getting the knockout win for himself in general was something that really fueled him and really pushed him and believed that he could be this knockout puncher. But Edwards was moving really well with his punches, kind of just tapping Carrillo out of the way and then sliding along with his punches, and it was excellent to see. His hand speed is great. His head movement is very good as well. When he gets, it is very, very good, and he can just drop his hands and rely on that head movement, which is something in which a lot of fighters don't have that luxury in being able to do, especially at a high, high level. You see the likes of Ben Whittaker trying to do that with his kind of playful style, but I don't necessarily know if he can do it at the high level, and only a few fighters can. And Edwards shown that he can now. He fights to his strength. I think that's something in which he's definitely done well in that last performance. I thought he definitely did fight to his strength. He didn't get drawn into a fight. He didn't fight emotionally or anything like that. He definitely did fight to his strength, and that's something in which, again, is an impressive thing as well. And I think that comes with experience. That comes with going through hardships of the defeat and things like that. And I think that defeat has taught him a lot. There was question marks coming into that Curiel fight, what we would see Edwards like, but like I say, I think he's fighting to his strengths a lot more now. He's got very good hand speed. He's confident. I believe they're both very confident coming into this fight, which is why it makes it into a more entertaining fight because they are both so confident. He's very accurate, sharp, crisp in a lot of his work, catches punches well. Even when he drops his guard, he picks it up when he needs to and catches punches necessarily when he needs to. He doesn't stay on the ropes too long, which is nice to see, especially against, like I say, that of a Curiel. Yafai will probably be walking Edwards down, so Edwards won't want to stay on the ropes. He tires you out with his movement a lot of the time. If you aren't able to keep that movement, that momentum going, he will tire you out, and your fight isn't really too used to that as of yet. His work rate, like I say, links onto that is excellent. He's got great reactions, picks his shots well, can fight on the back foot typically a lot of the time, is a bit of a back foot defensive type fighter in general, and finds openings well. Negatives about him, I think matching opponent's power, in general, the power is something that is lacking in his arsenal. Of course, he has the four stoppages. I believe one of them just being that last one versus Curiel, so you can't really count that as a TKO type stoppage. So I think he does struggle to match opponents' power, and making opponents kind of respect him is something in which, again, I think he struggles with a bit. But again, that if he fights with his strength, he doesn't necessarily have to make opponents respect him. He sometimes can fight emotionally, from what I believe. I think putting together combinations, he doesn't always put together the combinations to, win rounds. Sometimes he can cruise through rounds just from picking shots and moving. It's impressive that he can do that, but if Edwards is just picking a shot and moving, and Yafai is coming forwards, if Yafai lands with a combination, even if it's just one out of the whole round, it might look better than that of Edwards just kind of picking a shot and moving. When he ties up, I don't necessarily think he ties up too well. I think it can be messy and it can leave gaps open. So if he is going to tie up, then Yafai might be able to land clean. I think he can leave himself open. Like I say, he's typically very good at catching shots, but he does drop his guard. He can leave himself open. If the ring gets cut off, then he might get cornered, and that's when he might tie up and, struggle a little bit more from that. Like I say, he can cruise through rounds, and that's been shown through multiple fights now. Overlooking opponents is sure. It's something in which I've seen him do multiple times now, and in general losing focus a bit at the same time as well. It's all good having this confident style, but you can see him lose focus a bit at points as well. To speak about Yafai as a fighter, he's got typically quite a tight, nice guard. It does drop a bit, but when it's nice and tight, you can see him catching shots nice with it. He's definitely the more powerful out of the two. Like I say, he's going to walk you down and put together more combinations, and he's much more of a combination puncher in general. And that's something in which I believe, like I say, he has over Edwards. He works angles well, and perhaps a bit better than that of Edwards, a bit more shot variety in my opinion. I think he moves around you very well as well, and if he's able to move around Edwards, I'm sure Edwards is going to try and move with his punches and then kind of push Yafai around that way, but Yafai is going to try and make angles and pivot and to kind of jump around you that way. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets the better of them type of movement exchanges. He changes levels well. I think he mixes his power in his shots well, which is something in which perhaps catches opponents off guard when you see him, put up a couple shots in a combination and then switch to power to then become a lot more strong with it. It is impressive. He doubles up his shots nicely as well, and he fights at typically quite a high pace. Speaking negative about him, I think perhaps sometimes he does overreach. That's what Edwards is, of course, going to capitalise with his counters. He can force the fight a bit as well. His planting of feet, I think he's a lot more, he's a lot more of a front foot type fighter. Like I say, it's going to walk you down, but planting his feet sometimes, I don't think he's always doing it at the best of times. His head can be on the line a bit, and he definitely does get caught with shots. It's been shown in multiple fights now that he does get caught with shots. He doesn't always necessarily use his straight shots as well as what I'd like to see him do. Edwards can get caught with straight shots, and if he is being allowed to, then Yafai is going to need to use them. I believe he uh, does slow down in his movements a bit at times. I think he stays in range, trying to pick his shots a bit too much, being a bit too confident and not respecting his opponent and staying in range for too long. He steps into his punches and then he can get caught with overhands from doing that. I think he can get too comfortable himself, similar to that of Edwards. He can be hurt. I think he has been not damaged badly, but he's been rocked in certain fights. Like I say, I don't necessarily know if that's something that you need to worry about from Edwards, but he can get hurt at times. He's the less accurate out of the two, that's for sure. But like I say, it's going to be interesting to see what the judges are going to favour more, the accuracy or the output. And that's probably what's going to, be the two things that are going to happen from either side. And he does get hit a lot, in which, like I say, he's been shown to do. Edwards is the favourite for this fight, and I think Edwards is going to win it via unanimous decision. I think he's going to outmove him and not get caught on the ropes. I don't think Yafai is going to cut off the ring well enough to pin him down. I think Edwards is going to continuously pick shots. Yafai might become a bit frustrated, like I say, if he's very eager to put on a performance in front of his home crowd, in which, wouldn't surprise me if he is very eager to do that. I think he could become frustrated, and then that can go into Edwards' favour even more. Also, Edwards, I believe, like I say, is just going to be able to use his movement better. I think he's going to fight to his strength better. I think he's probably faced opponents similar to that of Yafai. I think Yafai is going to be showing that he's not quite at that level to be able to fight at a world level yet, in my opinion. And like I said, Edwards via unanimous decision. Then who he could go on to fight next? Possibly a Taraji. That, like I say, that could be a fight that would be an excellent fight, a great fight to be made. And I think in general, I would love to see Edwards get this opportunity to go to Japan and fight. It's been about time, I would say, realistically, that we see Edwards go to Japan and fight. He's been waiting for opportunities for such a long time. Like I mentioned, before the Bam fight, he was kind of calling out everybody and just hoping that somebody would pick up the phone. Obviously, Bam did that. He then lost that one, and that's pushed him back a little bit. But I don't want to just see him go back to fight in England now. I would like to see him go to Japan, have a big opportunity like that. So something like a Taraji would be a great option. Possibly something like a Sandoval that could take him back out to America. That could be in like a Golden Boy X Matchroom type fight. They're talking about a 5v5. Perhaps that could happen. We've just heard the news of Zepeda versus Stevenson not happening because of, I believe, Zepeda getting an injury. So, it's not at the level of that type of fight, Edwards Sandoval, but that would still be a good fight as well. So perhaps that could be an option. Or Olaskuga, I would love that fight. Olaskuga is a very aggressive fighter who is just going to land any kind of punch he can, and it's going to be, very entertaining whenever you see him fight. He's coming off a annoying contest versus Bomba Gonzalez, where that fight ended in a no contest, and we would like to see that contest again, but it wouldn't surprise me if Bomba Gonzalez is known for being quite difficult to work with, so it wouldn't surprise me if that doesn't happen. So perhaps an Olaskuga for the WBO title could happen, and like I say, that would be a great contest as well. But yeah, like I say, I think there are options available in the flyweight division at the moment. So we're just gonna have to wait and see who he's going to choose, and that's something in which Edwards hasn't always had the luxury of being able to do. So it's going to be interesting to see, like I say, who he can go on to fight next. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.